Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. More proof that we're heading towards global war, and I believe that global war will, in some way, cause the United States to become, to be removed as a superpower, to have their superpower status removed. But they're still going strong, apparently, currently, as the U.S. is preparing for a November showdown of sorts with China in the South China Sea. Now, the U.S. has been floating military hardware through the South China Sea, and so China rather has been warning the U.S. about these incursions apparently on their territory. This article is from BusinessInsider.com, and apparently the U.S. is planning for something in November as it relates to basically stirring up tensions in China. The U.S. military is planning a serious showdown with China that would be a significant show of force on tense tides and involve American warships and aircraft. The U.S. military is reportedly planning to send U.S. warships, combat aircraft, and troops through the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait in November in a series of exercises, it says, designed to send a message to Beijing. So the battle is still going on. China effectively has claimed ownership by way of the islands that they were basically allowed to create with no person standing up or stopping China or attempting to stop them. Just a war of words, really, by the rest of the world, and nothing really preventing them. They've already created the islands. They've already made runways on the islands and put military hardware on the islands. So it's disputed territory, but it's almost as if they own it now because no one's really contested it officially. The U.S., I believe, is currently the only nation that's really kind of going into their currently named, land, mass, and space, and territorial waters, and attempting to, deny that China has rights to that space. The proposal, it says, which comes at a time of heightened tension between the U.S. and China, has yet to be approved. In recent weeks, Washington and Beijing have quarreled over trade sanctions, Taiwan, repeated bomber flights over disputed seas, and confrontation between U.S. and Chinese warships. With Trump at the helm, if you will, in the U.S., it makes sense to me that this is likely going to occur. They're likely going to approve this as Trump is continuing to kind of get his way with China in terms of trade, etc., and basically set his leadership up around the world and get a precedent for his power and to kind of plant his power and the U.S. power around the world again, and trying to make up for all the years of being soft with all the nations, basically, which is what previous leaders have done around the world, and really lowered the U.S. Status around the world by not being the policeman, the world policeman, by not being that strong nation that comes out and defends other countries strongly. I mean, you can argue against that, but in terms of world superpower, basically, you have to be the one out there showing force around the world if you want to be a world leader. That has nothing to do with being Christian or not Christian. That's just what happens if you lead by power. Other nations are probably going to get out of your way if you're the most powerful nation on the block, as it were. And so that's just what happens in terms of the power struggle around the world. And so if the U.S. isn't doing that, they're going to lose their superpower status. I do believe in the last days they do lose their superpower status because they are nowhere to be found, specifically named in end-time Bible prophecy. And you have other major nations that are around right now that are specifically named: Persia, which is Iran. You have Russia. You have other nations that are specifically named or referred to, but you don't have the United States as an example. You don't have any Western powers, really. So what happens to them? Well, the speculation is that something happens to those Western nations. They're taken out of power by what I believe is worldwide economic collapse. I believe that's what happens in the last days, which sets things up for a Middle East battle, takes focus away from Western nations, from North America, from other nations. China is another one that's referenced in end-time Bible prophecy. And the only reference you maybe have for the U.S. is the young lions of Tarshish spoken of in Ezekiel 38, which are, the offspring of Britain, effectively, that being, Canada, the U.S., Australia, for example. Those could all fall into that same category. But the most obvious would probably be the U.S. because they're the superpower. They're the ones that everybody expects to be in end-time Bible prophecy, but are not there for some reason. And what's the context? Well, these nations, when Ezekiel 38 happens, when when Gog is drawn into Israel, these young lions of Tarshish are simply saying, What are you doing in Israel? Have you come to take a spoil? And they're just saying words. They're not actually going to battle against Russia, Iran, and the whole alliance of nations. And so in the last days, it doesn't appear that the U.S. is there in any significant form. So they're taken out of power either by military force, I believe, though it's not by military force, at least initially. I think an economic collapse, that's all you need to take the U.S. out of world superpower status. All you need to take all Western nations out is a worldwide economic collapse, and they are brought to their knees. They can't stand in the face of economic collapse. Democratic societies really can't stand in the face of economic collapse, whereas communist dictatorship countries will stand because they're ruled by military power. They're ruled by fear and strength. So they will be left standing in an economic collapse. Yes, they will be weakened, but the military will still be left standing, and there will be still significant players in the last days. So these are the things that I see coming, and this is an interesting provocation that is apparently coming in November. So we see a buildup of wars and rumors of wars. We don't see any slowdown to this. We are in the last days. I believe we're about 9 years out from the second coming of the Lord, the year 2028, the end of the 6,000 years of man on this earth. Do you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? Because He's coming back soon. The rapture may happen a lot sooner than any of us think, and the 7-year tribulation is going to start in the next 2 years, I believe. By the year 2021, I believe that's when it gets kicked off. So thanks for watching. I'll leave it there, and we'll see you guys in the next video.